The day the Zephyrian Imperial fleet descended upon Earth's atmosphere, Admiral Kexathara had expected the usual routine: atmospheric entry, display of overwhelming force, terrified planetary surrender, and the standard 20-minute ceremony, where the primitive species would grovel before the might of the Galactic Empire. What she hadn't expected was for the entire planet to burst into uncontrollable laughter. It started in New York City, where millions of humans had gathered in Times Square to witness what their media had dramatically dubbed First Contact. The massive Zephyrian dreadnought, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length and bristling with plasma cannons that could glass continents, slowly descended through the clouds like a metallic mountain. Its hull was adorned with the ceremonial spikes and battle standards of 1,000 conquered worlds, each one a testament to the Empire's unstoppable expansion across the galaxy. But as the ship's massive form blocked out the sun, casting an ominous shadow over the assembled crowds, something unexpected happened. A small child, no more than 7 years old, pointed up at the imposing warship and exclaimed in a voice that carried impossibly far in the sudden silence, "Mommy, why does their spaceship look like a giant angry pickle?" The comparison was unfortunately apt. The Zephyrian aesthetic, which had struck terror into the hearts of countless civilizations, did indeed bear an uncanny resemblance to an enormous, weaponized vegetable. The ship's elongated hull, covered in defensive ridges and sensor arrays, looked remarkably like the bumpy green surface of Earth's most humble preserved cucumber. The similarity was so striking, so absolutely ridiculous, that it took exactly 2.3 seconds for the first human to snort with laughter. That snort became a chuckle. The chuckle became a giggle. The giggle became a roar of laughter that spread through the crowd like wildfire. Within minutes, the entire population of New York City was doubled over with laughter, tears streaming down their faces as they pointed at the mighty Imperial warship hovering above them. The laughter was infectious, spreading through social media, television broadcasts, and radio waves across the globe at the speed of light. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kexathara stood frozen in bewilderment, her 4 arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws that had personally dispatched dozens of enemy commanders, hung uselessly at her sides. Her compound eyes, evolved to track the fastest prey across the hunting grounds of her homeworld, could only stare in incomprehension at the readings streaming across her tactical displays. "Admiral," croaked Subcommander Vextar, his voice trembling with confusion, "the humans appear to be making noise, quite loudly." "I can see that, you molting fool," Kexathara hissed, her mandibles clicking with agitation. "But what does it mean? Are they performing some kind of war chant? A religious ceremony, a psychic attack?" The bridge crew of the Eternal Dominion had collectively conquered 17 star systems and subjugated 43 different species. They had faced down plasma storms, navigated through time distortions, and survived encounters with spacefaring, predators the size of moons. But nothing in their extensive military training had prepared them for this scenario. "Perhaps," suggested Navigation Officer Quintel, his voice barely above a whisper, "they are expressing terror in some incomprehensible alien fashion." But even as he spoke, the laughter continued to spread. It jumped from continent to continent, carried by global communication networks faster than their ships could track. London erupted in fits of giggles. Tokyo dissolved into hysterics. Sydney's population was rolling on the ground, clutching their sides. Even the most serious government officials, military leaders, and scientists found themselves overcome with mirth as images of the giant space pickle flooded every screen on the planet. The laughter wasn't cruel or mocking. It was pure, joyful, uncontainable human amusement at the cosmic absurdity of the situation. Here was humanity's first contact with an alien civilization, one of the most momentous events in their species' history, and it had been reduced to the world's greatest case of the giggles because their visitors happened to pilot spacecraft that looked like oversized vegetables. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist and the appointed spokesperson for humanity's first contact protocol, was supposed to deliver a carefully prepared speech about peaceful coexistence and interspecies cooperation. Instead, she found herself gasping, for breath between fits of laughter, her prepared notes scattered on the ground as she tried desperately to compose herself. "I'm sorry," she wheezed into her microphone, her voice broadcast to both the human population and the increasingly bewildered alien fleet. "It's just, have you seen your ship? From down here? It really does look like a pickle. A really, really big pickle." This triggered a fresh wave of laughter that seemed to physically shake the planet. Seismographs around the world registered the collective vibrations of 7 billion humans laughing simultaneously. The sound rose into the atmosphere, where it was picked up by the Zephyrian fleet's audio sensors and transmitted to every ship in their formation. Admiral Kexathera had never experienced anything like this in her 3 centuries of military service. The Empire's Xenopsychology Department had prepared detailed profiles of likely human responses to first contact: fear, aggression, worship, submission, even suicidal despair. But nowhere in their extensive files was there a single mention of whatever this was. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Zixandra, her voice cracking with strain, "we're receiving thousands of transmissions from the planet's surface. They appear to be images, moving images, all depicting various forms of vegetation?" The main screen filled with a cascade of what humans called memes, hastily created images comparing the Zephyrian fleet to pickles, cucumbers, zucchini, and every other elongated green vegetable known to Earth's agricultural history. Some enterprising humans had already photoshopped little faces onto the images, complete with angry expressions and tiny arms waving menacingly. "They're mocking us," growled Weapons Master Toxul, his battle-scarred hide flushing with indignation. "These primitive beings dare to ridicule the might of the Galactic Empire." But Admiral Kexathera wasn't so sure. She had studied the tactical readouts, analyzed the planetary defenses, and assessed the human military capabilities. Earth's weapons were primitive, their space technology barely capable of reaching their own moon. By all logic, they should have been cowering in terror or preparing for a desperate last stand. Instead, they were laughing, genuinely, uncontrollably laughing. As the laughter continued to echo through space, something strange began to happen to the Zephyrian crew. Sub-Commander Vextar found the corner of his mouth twitching upward, in what his species called a comfort expression. Navigation Officer Quintel's rigid posture began to relax as the infectious sound of human mirth penetrated even his military conditioning. The laughter was doing something that no weapon, no threat, no show of force had ever accomplished in the Empire's long history of conquest. It was making the Zephyrians question not just their mission, but the very nature of the universe itself. How could a species faced with overwhelming odds, staring down the barrel of planetary subjugation, respond with such pure, uncomplicated joy? "Admiral," whispered Communications Officer Zixandra, I think they're having fun." The concept was so alien to the Zephyrian mindset that it took several minutes for the translation software to process it. Fun. Enjoyment without purpose. Pleasure without conquest. Joy without dominion. It was a concept that had been systematically purged from imperial culture generations ago, dismissed as a weakness that made soldiers soft and citizens complacent. But listening to the humans laugh, watching their complete lack of fear in the face of annihilation, Admiral Kexathera began to remember something from her childhood. A feeling she had experienced once, long ago, before military training and imperial conditioning had shaped her into the perfect weapon of conquest. She remembered what it felt like to find something genuinely amusing, and despite every instinct, every bit of training, every fiber of her military conditioning, Admiral Kexathera found herself doing something she hadn't done in over 2 centuries. She laughed. It started as a small chuckle, barely audible over the bridge's ambient noise. But as the human laughter continued to pour through the communication systems, as the absurdity of the situation truly sank in, her chuckle grew into a full-throated laugh that echoed through the corridors of the Eternal Dominion. The sound was so unexpected, so unprecedented, that it stopped every Zephyrian on the ship in their tracks. Their admiral, the iron-willed conqueror of the Outer Rim, the scourge of the Rebel Alliance, The being who had personally overseen the subjugation of entire star systems was laughing, and just like that, the infection spread through the Imperial fleet like wildfire. First one ship, then another, until the entire Zephyrian armada was filled with the sound of alien laughter mixing with human mirth in a cosmic symphony of absurdity. For the first time in galactic history, a first contact scenario had devolved into the universe's largest case of the giggles, and nobody, not the humans, not the Zephyrians, not even the Empire's most advanced AI systems, had any idea what to do about it. The emergency council meeting aboard the Eternal Dominion was unlike any military briefing in the Empire's 10,000-year history. For one thing, Admiral Kexathera couldn't stop giggling every time she looked at the tactical hologram displaying their fleet formation. For another, half her senior staff were clutching their sides, their faces flushed with what their species' medical officers were frantically trying to classify as either a new form of psychological warfare or a previously unknown alien pathogen. Status. Report, wheezed Admiral Kexathera, trying desperately to compose herself as tears of laughter streamed down her scaled cheeks. And somebody please turn off that display. Every time I see our ships arranged in formation, I keep thinking about Earth's vegetable gardens. The mere mention of vegetables sent Sub-Commander Vextar into a fresh fit of snorting laughter that he tried unsuccessfully to disguise as a cough. Admiral, he managed between gasps. The humans they've named our ships. The Destroyer of Worlds is now apparently called Big Dill. The Harbinger of Doom has been dubbed Pickle Rick. And our flagship. He paused, struggling to maintain his composure. They're calling us the SS Vlasic. Dr. Zeflin, the fleet's chief xenopsychologist, had been frantically taking notes on a data pad, her normally pristine uniform disheveled from her own laughing fits. Admiral, I've been analyzing the human neural patterns from our long-range sensors. This isn't a defense mechanism or a psychological warfare tactic. They're genuinely experiencing what their species calls humor, and somehow it's become contagious across species barriers. Impossible, declared Weapons Master Toxul, though his own voice cracked with suppressed mirth. Humor is a weakness. The Empire purged such frivolities from our culture centuries ago. How can a primitive emotion affect our superior Zephyrian physiology? But even as he spoke, Toxul's own battle-scarred features twitched with what could only be described as amusement. The Empire's most decorated warrior, a being who had personally led the assault on the crystalline citadels of Zerion Prime, couldn't stop his mandibles from clicking in what his species' equivalent of a smile. That's just it, Dr. Zeflin continued, her scientific fascination overriding her military conditioning. We didn't purge humor, we buried it. It's still there, encoded in our neural pathways, waiting. The humans have somehow activated dormant emotional centers that we haven't accessed in generations. The implications were staggering. If the Empire's most elite warriors could be reduced to giggling soldiers by exposure to human laughter, what did that say about their invincibility? What did it say about the very foundations of their society? Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the situation had evolved beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Dr. Sarah Chen had finally managed to establish proper communication protocols with the alien fleet, though every attempt at serious diplomacy was undermined by periodic fits of laughter from both sides. Admiral Kexathera, she said into her microphone, trying to maintain scientific dignity while wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. On behalf of the human species, I'd like to formally welcome you to our solar system, though I have to ask, did anyone in your fleet's design department ever consider that your ships might look like, well, pickles? The question was broadcast across the entire Zephyrian fleet, and the response was immediate. Thousands of alien voices erupted in laughter so loud that it registered on Earth's seismic monitoring equipment. Even Admiral Kexathara, who had spent decades perfecting her intimidating command presence, found herself doubled over with uncontrollable giggles. Dr. Chen, she managed to reply between laughs, I can honestly say that in 3 centuries of military service, no one has ever asked me that question. And now that you mention it... She paused, looking at her own ship's schematics with fresh eyes. By the ancient gods of Zephyr, we really do look like pickles. This admission triggered a new wave of laughter that spread through both fleets and planet simultaneously. But it also marked a turning point. For the first time in the Empire's history, one of their admirals had acknowledged something that could be construed as a design flaw, and she was laughing about it. The real twist came when Fleet Commander Korksvat, Admiral Kexthara's superior and one of the Empire's most feared military leaders, arrived via quantum communication from the Imperial capital ship 3 star systems away. His holographic image materialized on the bridge, his 4 arms crossed in the traditional pose of Imperial authority, his compound eyes gleaming with the cold efficiency that had made him the scourge of the galaxy. Admiral Kexthara, his voice, boomed with the authority of someone who had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. Explain to me why my invasion fleet is currently engaging in what appears to be a planetary-scale comedy routine instead of securing Earth's surrender. The bridge fell silent. This was it, the moment when their commander would be court-martialed for the most embarrassing military failure in galactic history. Admiral Kexthara straightened her posture, prepared to accept whatever punishment awaited her. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the communication system, having somehow managed to patch into the Imperial military network. "Excuse me," she said with the polite assertiveness that had made her Earth's leading diplomat, "but are you the one in charge of pickle ship design? Because I have to say, from an engineering perspective, it's actually quite impressive. The aerodynamics alone must be fascinating." Fleet Commander Korksvat's carefully composed expression flickered. His mouth twitched. His compound eyes shifted to look at the tactical display showing his fleet's formation. And for the first time in decades, he saw his ships not as instruments of conquest, but as they truly appeared to outside observers. They do look like pickles," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the communication system. And then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, Fleet Commander Korksvat, the Iron Fist of the Empire, the conqueror of the Andromeda sector, the being whose very name struck fear into the hearts of 1,000 species, began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, but quickly grew into full-bodied laughter that shook his entire command ship. The sound was so unprecedented that it temporarily overloaded the communication systems, creating a feedback loop that broadcast his laughter to every ship in the Imperial fleet, to every human on Earth, and to monitoring stations across half the galaxy. "Admiral Kexthara," he gasped between fits of laughter, "I hereby authorize you to engage in whatever this is. Consider it a new form of diplomatic first contact. And for the love of the ancient gods, find out how they do it." The authorization was the official sanction humanity needed to do what they did best: turn a potentially catastrophic situation into the galaxy's most bizarre cultural exchange. Within hours, human comedians were performing stand-up routines broadcast directly to the Zephyrian fleet. Alien anthropologists were frantically taking notes on the concept of humor, while their own species rediscovered laughter for the first time in centuries. And somewhere in the chaos, the foundations of the Galactic Empire began to crack, not from weapons or warfare, but from the simple, revolutionary act of finding joy in absurdity. The twist that would change everything was about to emerge. The Empire's most feared weapon wasn't their plasma cannons or their massive fleets. It was their complete inability to understand that conquest wasn't the only way to bring the galaxy together. Humanity was about to teach them that sometimes the best way to unite the stars was to laugh at them. 3 days after first contact, the situation had evolved far beyond anyone's ability to control it. What started as an invasion had transformed into the galaxy's first interspecies comedy festival, with Earth serving as an impromptu cultural exchange center for a civilization that had forgotten how to smile. The real revelation came when Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cultural anthropologist from Mexico City, made a discovery that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. She had been studying the Zephyrian language patterns, trying to understand how their communication had evolved, when she stumbled upon something extraordinary buried deep in their linguistic databases. "Admiral Kexthara," she announced during one of their now daily diplomatic sessions. "I need to show you something that might explain why our laughter affects your species so profoundly." The communication screen flickered to life, displaying Dr. Vasquez's findings. But this time, instead of the usual diplomatic meeting room, she was broadcasting from the ruins of an ancient Zephyrian temple that her team had reconstructed virtually using their archaeological databases. "This is the Temple of Zixandra on your homeworld," she began, her voice filled with the excitement of discovery. "It's over 3,000 years old, built during what your historical records call the Age of Silence, the period when your empire supposedly purged weakness from your culture." Admiral Kexathara leaned forward, her compound eyes widening. She recognized the temple from childhood memories, though she couldn't quite place why it seemed so familiar and yet so foreign. "But here's what's fascinating," Dr. Vasquez continued, zooming in on ancient carvings along the temple walls. "These aren't victory monuments or conquest records. They're jokes. Thousands of them. Your ancestors had an incredibly sophisticated sense of humor. Puns, wordplay, visual gags, even what we humans would recognize as ancient memes." The silence on the Zephyrian bridge was deafening. Sub-Commander Vextar's mandibles clicked nervously as he stared at carvings that depicted his ancestors, engaged in activities that looked suspiciously like fun. Ancient Zephyrians were shown telling stories, playing games, and yes, even laughing, together. "Impossible," whispered Weapons Master Toxul, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Empire's historical records clearly state that we evolved beyond such primitive emotions." "Did you?" Dr. Vasquez asked gently. "Or did you simply bury them so deeply that you forgot they existed? Because according to these carvings, your species didn't just have humor, you celebrated it. There's even evidence of an annual festival, called the Great Rejoicing, where different Zephyrian clans would compete to create the most amusing performances." The revelation hit the Zephyrian crew like a plasma blast to the hull. Everything they had been taught about their species' evolution, their cultural superiority, their natural dominance, it was all built on a lie. They weren't naturally humorless conquerors. They were a species that had surgically removed joy from their own souls in the name of efficiency. Admiral Kexathara found herself staring at one particular carving, a group of young Zephyrians playing what looked remarkably like a game, their faces carved with expressions of pure delight. Something deep in her genetic memory stirred, a phantom sensation of what it might have felt like to experience such uncomplicated happiness. "There's more," Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice soft with empathy. "The historical records show that the purge of weakness wasn't a natural evolution. It was a military directive issued during your species' first major interstellar war. Your leaders decided that emotions like joy, humor, and play were liabilities in battle, so they systematically conditioned them out of your culture over several generations." "But why?" asked Communications Officer Zixandra, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would we choose to abandon something that brought us happiness?" "Because," Dr. Vasquez replied, "someone convinced your ancestors that happiness was incompatible with strength, that to be powerful you had to be emotionally empty. But what if they were wrong? What if the very thing you thought made you weak was actually the source of your greatest strength?" The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert that sent shockwaves through both the human and Zephyrian communities. Long-range sensors had detected another fleet approaching, but this wasn't reinforcements for the Zephyrians. It was the Krillian Dominion, the Empire's most feared enemy, and they were heading straight for Earth at maximum velocity. "Admiral," reported Sub-Commander Vextar, his voice tight with renewed military tension, "the Krillian Advance Fleet will reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Intelligence suggests they've been monitoring our communications. They know about the situation. The Krillians were everything the Zephyrians had tried to become, perfectly emotionless warriors who had embraced the logic of pure conquest without any of the messy complications of feelings. They were also utterly ruthless, with a well-documented history of obliterating entire star systems that showed any sign of emotional contamination. They're not coming to invade Earth, Admiral Kexathara realized with growing horror. They're coming to sterilize it. To them, a planet that can make other species laugh is a threat to galactic order itself. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice crackled. Through the communication system, her scientific calm now tinged with urgency. Admiral, our deep space monitoring stations confirm your assessment. The Krillian fleet isn't configured for occupation. It's configured for planetary elimination. They intend to destroy Earth to prevent the spread of what they're calling the laughter plague. The irony was devastating. Humanity had managed to achieve something unprecedented. They had made their would-be conquerors laugh, rediscovered. The Zephyrians lost capacity for joy and begun building bridges across the galaxy through nothing more than shared humor. And now, that very achievement had marked them for extinction. But then something remarkable happened. Admiral Kexathera stood up from her command chair, her forearms spreading wide in a gesture that hadn't been used in Zephyrian military protocol. For over 1,000 years, the ancient stance of protection, not conquest. Dr. Chen, she announced, her voice carrying across both fleets and every human communication network. On behalf of the Zephyrian Empire, I hereby formally request permission to defend Earth against the Krillian invasion. The bridge fell silent. Sub-Commander Vexatar's jaw dropped open. Weapons Master Toxel's scarred features twisted in confusion. Communications Officer Zixandra stared at her Admiral as if she had just proposed flying directly into a black hole. Admiral, Vextar finally managed, you're talking about going to war with the Krillian Dominion to protect a planet we came here to conquer. That's insane? Admiral Kexathera finished with a smile that her species hadn't seen in centuries. Illogical? Completely contrary to everything the Empire stands for? She paused, looking around at her crew, beings who had rediscovered laughter, who had glimpsed their own species' forgotten capacity for joy, who had experienced 3 days of genuine happiness for the first time in their lives. You're absolutely right, she continued. It is all of those things. But you know what? For the first time in 3 centuries, I don't care about logic or military protocol or imperial doctrine. I care about protecting something beautiful. The ability to laugh, to find joy in absurdity, to discover friendship instead of conquest. She turned to face the main communication screen, addressing both her own fleet and the humans listening. Below. The Krillians want to destroy Earth because they fear what you've shown us, that there's another way to live, another way to build civilization. They're afraid that if other species learn to laugh, their empire of fear will crumble. Admiral Kexathera's smile widened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the authority of someone who had finally found something worth fighting for. Well, let's give them something to really be afraid of. Let's show them what happens when the galaxy learns to laugh together. The twist that would define the next phase of their story was crystallizing. The species that came to conquer Earth was about to become humanity's most unlikely protector, not because of treaties or alliances, but because humans had given them back their souls. And in 18 hours, they would face their greatest test, proving that joy was not a weakness to be purged, but a strength powerful enough to unite the stars.